Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon. This is Abelardo de la Peña Jr. Welcoming you to today's En Casa con la Plaza Cocina. Every Monday, we have cooking demonstrations brought to you by La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, and today's sponsor is Union Pacific Foundation. A little bit of update on La Plaza. We're open every day except Tuesday from 12 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Soon, we're going to extend our weekend hours, but I'll be sure and let you know either via En Casa or our newsletter or on social media. We want to make it a little bit easier for you to come and visit us on weekends. Currently at La Plaza, we just closed down one of our exhibits, Afro Latinidad. If you didn't catch it, you could go to our website, lapca.org, and take a virtual tour. And we hope that it's going to be traveling to a museum in San Diego. More to come on that later. We're currently, once that deinstallation is complete, we'll be installing a brand new exhibit for you, opening in November, and we'll keep you up to date on that as well. Public programming continues. This weekend we have a big one, Leala, L-E-A-L-A. It's a festival de literatura en español, 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, with workshops, panel discussions, and lots of books and authors and much more. It's free of charge, so come on by Viernes, Sábado, o Domingo and enjoy some beautiful, wonderful Spanish literature in Spanish. And what else? Oh yeah, just last Wednesday we had our gala, our Big Pobladores Awards event. And if you didn't make it here, we also streamed it. And if you didn't catch the stream, you could catch the live stream on our YouTube page, and I'm gonna drop down the URL right there, the link. Don't watch it now, watch it later. Did it go in? No, it didn't, but I will do that as we progress in today's show. I've been trying to link up to Facebook, but as you all know, Facebook was down, but we're recording this. After we're done, I'll try again and post it on Facebook and our YouTube page as well. But with that, let me bring up our host for En Casa con la Plaza Cocina, our Director of Programming and Culinary Arts, Jimena Martin. Please join us, Jimena.
Hola, Berardo, ¿cómo estás?
Pues yo bien, ¿y tú?
Ahí más o menos con un calorcito. It's a hot day here. Again, thank you so much, Alberto, for the wonderful work y'all did with the gala last week. We are so proud, and it's all in the good cause, for La Plaza to continue providing free programs on site, and then also be here in your homes during Casa con La Plaza.
Oh yeah, well, just to let everybody know, Jimena was one of our honorees as one of the founding staff members of La Plaza, celebrating 10 years in existence. So thank you so much for your leadership, for your everything that you do for La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, including En Casa con la Plaza Cocina.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a labor of love. I'm so happy, so happy. And anyways, we have a visitor, a guest, all the way from New York City. Please let me introduce you, Lesley Tellez. Lesley Tellez is a Chicana journalist, recipe developer, entrepreneur, and a Mexican cookbook author. Her book, which I have right here, Eat Mexico, Recipes from Mexico City's Streets and Markets and Fondas, 2015. We were so fortunate when she kicked off her book. She came and did a food talk, a plática, and then she shared a recipe with us. But we have her back. In addition to a beautiful cookbook, she's also has written on Mexican food and identity. She has published in Taste, Bon Appetit, the New York Times, the Guardian, the LA Times, and Serious Eats. And then today she's going to make us Pollo Rostizado en Adobo. Hi, Lesley. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
So tell us, Lesley, I know we have your cookbook here. We had you on before, but I know folks are always interested in how your career, or what did you study? Tell us about your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, definitely. So I didn't really grow up cooking like this, just to make that clear. I grew up in Southern California, and I grew up third generation Mexican American, and we ate some Mexican food in my house growing up, but it was kind of a mishmash of all different sorts of things. I studied journalism in college, and after college, I decided that I really wanted to move to Mexico City, actually, where I had never been before. But I felt in my heart that that's where I needed to go. So I took a buyout from my newspaper job in 2008, and I moved to Mexico City in 2009. And I was just totally blown away by the food. I had never really, I had never seen Mexican food like that. I thought that I knew what Mexican cooking was, and I went to Mexico City to live and realized, oh my gosh, I know, 3 grains of sand in the beach of Mexican cuisine. I don't know very much at all. And to see so many foods, particularly on the street, being made fresh and they tasted so good, just blew me away. It was astonishing to me. And I wanted to know as much as I possibly could about it. So I enrolled in cooking school in Mexico City, in a cooking school that focused on Mexican cooking. And I started a food tour company there in 2010 called Eat Mexico, that I'm not involved with anymore, but I ran it for 10 years. And we gave small group food tours of different neighborhoods in Mexico City. And then I decided that I wanted to write a cookbook because people kept taking the tours and they were really struck with the same thing that I had been struck with, which is, wow, I didn't expect this food to be so amazing at the markets, on the streets, and the fondas. So I really wanted to write a cookbook, and so I did. In 2015, the cookbook came out, and yeah, so that's kind of been my journey in getting to know Mexican cooking, and I'm still learning every day. I'm not cooking as much from scratch as I used to because I have 2 small children, 3 and 6. So a lot of the Mexican cooking I do now is stuff that I can make in 30 minutes or 45 minutes. So we eat a lot of quesadillas and tostadas and things like that in our house. But yeah, it's really fun to revisit some of these dishes from the cookbook, and this is actually one of my favorite. Well, they're all really good, but the Pollo Rostizado and Adobo came about because I was really, again, like I didn't really know much about Mexican roasted chicken. I grew up eating pollo loco, like we all did, right? If you're from Southern California, we ate pollo loco like everybody else. That was my concept of Mexican roasted chicken. But when I moved to Mexico City, there were these actual like chicken roasting places, like a rosticeria, where you would walk by. I remember there was one really close to my house where I would walk by, and it would have these, it was open air, and it would have these chickens, roasting and dripping their fat all over, onions and cabbage that would be on the bottom below the roasting spits. And the smell was amazing. And so you could go and order it, and they give you these like freshly fried potato chips in a little baggie, and as many the greasy chicken fat soaked onions and cabbage as you wanted. And it's, pollo loco, that's fine, that's its own thing, but this was like a whole other level of something, an experience. And so when I was writing the cookbook, I thought, I really want to include a roast chicken dish, like a roast chicken, because there's so many of them, all around the city. And so luckily, I was chatting with a friend of mine who's a food writer, and he offered to provide the recipe for this dish. Alonso Rubalcaba is his name, and I can write it in the chat if anybody wants to look him up. He's actually like a fantastic writer. But yeah, he's the one who provided this recipe, but it's a little bit different from the roast chicken. The roast chicken, like majority of the time that I saw on the streets of Mexico City, was it wasn't spicy. It was more or less plain old roasted chicken, and you would get the different like accoutrements. This one has an adobo, so like a really yummy marinade that's a mixture of chiles and spices, peanuts, cinnamon. There's actually vanilla in this, which is, the first time I saw the recipe, I was like, vanilla? That's a little odd. But it really adds this wonderful depth and an undertone to the marinade.
Real quick, I'm sorry, Lesley, to interrupt you real quick. I think it's now people more aware of the power of Mexican cuisine, and there's more Mexican American or Mexican cookbook authors, which is wonderful to really give a true voice per se. Can you tell us a little bit how do we able to get your book deal? Because I know there's a lot of people listening who are maybe cookbook, they're writing their recipes or documenting their stories. How was it that you were able, after you did your collection of recipes, to have your book produced?
Yeah, so the big vehicle for me to get my cookbook deal was because I actually had a blog. So at the time I had started a food blog, and it wasn't even, I didn't even have super duper high numbers of visitors even, compared to what it was, what it's like now as far as food blogs and people getting millions of hits a month. I didn't have that kind of traffic, but I did have like a loyal following. And I was a finalist in a few different blog awards. So that mattered as far as putting the proposal together. I had a platform, so I was already writing about food. So when I was looking for an agent, that also caught their eye, the fact that I had a blog, I had a platform. I had not at that time published any recipes beyond on my blog. I hadn't published in, all of the magazines and things that came later. I had not done any of that. I really hadn't done any recipe development besides on my blog. So people, you don't necessarily, this is what happened to me. I don't think it has changed that much, but I wasn't like a professional recipe developer. I didn't have that credit, and I was still able to move forward because of having my blog and carving out this little niche for myself. So as far as getting the deal, I went to a conference for Latina writers in Brooklyn, and I pitched my book in an elevator pitch, like slam style session. I pitched it in 30 seconds. And at that point I had the proposal written, and a friend supplied her proposal, a friend who'd written the cookbook. She sent me her proposal, so I used that as a guide. And actually I send my proposal to pretty much anybody who asks, because that was so helpful for me. So she sent me her proposal. I used that as a guide. I pitched my idea, and one of the agents came up to me afterward and said, "Hey, I was really interested. I'd like you to send me your proposal." I was like, "Oh, okay, great." And I already had it done, so I was able to send it to him. And within a couple months, he got back to me and said, "Okay, great, we want to represent you." So that was amazing. I didn't query a bunch of agents. Like he seemed to get the idea, and I was like, okay, great. And then from there, we got a lot of rejection. When we started shopping the book around, most people said, pretty much everybody said, "You're not a name. You're not a famous chef. Nobody really knows who you are. People don't read Mexican cookbooks. Mexican cookbooks don't sell." And that's pretty much what we got. I got at least a dozen rejections. We shopped it for 7 months until I got one hit. And at that point I was sort of like, I don't know, losing hope. And by the way, now I just want to jump ahead in time and say, like, at the time, there really weren't any cookbooks about Mexico City in English. And one of the comments I got a lot over and over, "It's too niche. Nobody wants to read a cookbook about Mexico City. It's too niche." And I was like, but the food is amazing. The food culture there is amazing. I'm not believing what you're saying. It's too niche, I wasn't going to change the book based on that. And now there's at least 5 other cookbooks about Mexico City food.
No, I think I have a couple here. I gotta bring down. Well, you're cooking, I'll pull them out, but yeah, it's just on Mexican City.
Edison Fuentes, I think, just wrote one. There's a lot. And so it's like, the point is, if believe in your idea, people are going to tell you no, because sometimes I had felt like cookbook publishers were living in, 15 years ago. But I knew what I knew. And so I didn't want to give up. And luckily we got one hit, and then one hit turned to 3 hits, but that was like 8 months in. And one of those publishing houses I really liked. They seemed to really get what I was trying to do. They offered me a nice advance. So I was like, okay, sounds great. So, and then I turned in the book about 10 months later, I turned in all the recipes.
No, congratulations. It's believing in your dreams. You lived it. It's not like you know what exactly was happening in the city of Mexico City with all the great food and the vendors out there to continue and have a voice. Luckily, hopefully the US market and foodies are like really appreciating it and acknowledging all the different types of food. And each state in Mexico has its own regional specialties. You know, it's just hot tacos, burritos, and, you know, tostadas. They're delicious, don't get me wrong, but every state has something special to offer, and every city has its own, attractions. And the Mexico City food on the streets is definitely one of them. But thank you for being persistent and bringing the book to us.
Yes, thank you. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and jump in. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do in this dish, and it's not that complicated. It sounds you're making a marinade from scratch, but it's not terribly complicated. But the first thing we're going to do is soak the chiles because they need to soften. So that's the first thing you want to do. I have an electric kettle that I use because it's just easy. So I'm going to turn on my electric kettle to boil my water. I like to use an electric kettle or super hot boiling water if I'm working with guajillos, which could show you they tend to just have a bit of a thicker skin, and they can take a little bit longer to soften up. So while that is heating up, I'm going to move to the comal that I have set, another camera angle that I have set up. Because I want to show you just a quick toasting, which will bring out some of the aromas. You don't really have to toast it. And I admit, when I was first learning about Mexican cooking, I was really nervous about toasting. I kept thinking I was going to burn everything. And I did burn it sometimes, but if it gives you anxiety, like it used to give me, then you don't have to toast it. It's fine. So I have my guajillo, and I just have like a dry skillet. You could use a comal if you wanted to, but the comal does get really hot. So I just use a dry skillet. And wait till I have it on like medium low. You don't want to put the flame up too high because it'll burn the chiles, and then it leaves them with like this bitter flavor, which sometimes you want to burn the chiles, depending on if you're making a specific type of sauce or mole or something like that. But in this dish, you do not want to burn the chiles. So I'm just putting them in the pan here. You can see dry. And I'm just going to turn them over and let them sit for a minute and kind of puff up. And after we do this, we're going to snip off the ends and take the seeds out. And usually when they start to toast, they smell delicious. So, yeah. And luckily, like with this recipe, there really aren't that many chiles to do. So there's 2 guajillos, 2 chile morita, which I'll talk about in a minute, and 2 regular chipotle meco is what they call them in Mexico City, which is like the leathery brown chipotle. Interestingly, I could not find those close to my house, just like, loose. So I just am going to use 4 moritas today. All right, I think this is good. Yeah, I can sort of show you. They have like a few kind of like light colored spots. I don't know if y'all can see. There's like a few little light colored spots on the chiles, which shows me that they're toasting, but they're not burned. If they burn, you will see black. All right, so this is good. Take these off and move back over to the other place. And so now you can really, after I took them off the comal, you can really smell that delicious chile aroma. And I'm going to snip off the top. I have my handy trash can off camera. And I really like using kitchen shears. It's super easy. Just slice them right open. And I'm gonna shake the seeds out onto my cutting
I
board
think
here.
I think the kitchen shears are the most underrated
Right?
tool in the kitchen, because you can, like, besides snip your chiles, you can snip your herbs. Besides the chicken, you want to break it in half. It does everything. It's a great tool.
And I use it to cut my daughter's pizza in half. They're great. Okay, so I'm just shaking out the seeds here. I remember when I was learning how to cook, Mexican food and cooking class, and we had to stem and seed so many chiles. And I remember thinking, isn't there a faster way to do this? just not the point, right? No, there's not a faster way.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the school you went to, the cooking school you went in Mexico City? It's so famous, and the chef passed away, was it last year?
Yes, he did. Yuri de Gortari. So I went to the Escuela de Gastronomía Mexicana, and at the time they had just opened, at the time they were in this really neat colonial era mansion that I think they had said was a former embassy, I believe, for the US, like many years ago. But this beautiful colonial era mansion with this gorgeous patio, wrought iron gate in the front, and you move beyond that into a patio with trees, and you go into, they had the classrooms were sort of doors that gathered around this open patio. So it was just beautiful. But when I started there in 2010, they had just started doing this program, the intensive Diplomado en Gastronomía Mexicana. So it was a 14-month program. It ended up taking a little bit longer because of scheduling and stuff at the school. But a 14-month program, I believe it was once a week for 4 to 5 hours. And we learned everything from pre-Hispanic cooking to modern day in theory. But the focus really was the vice-regal period was what they spent a lot of time on. And I'm going to pause there and just show you. So this is a chile morita. I'm just going to, you can see it's like a sort of prune colored, super smoky chile. And what I learned is that this is a serrano when fresh, and then they smoke it. And it's super popular here. I'm going to just toast these. It's super popular. I'm going to move to the comal. I'll tell you a little bit about these. Super popular in New York City because it's very common in Puebla. Chipotles are super prized in Puebla. It has like a chipotle here. The others, going to what at the school, so the instructors, the way that they had it set up was really neat. They spent the first half of the class teaching history of Mexican cooking. And they spent the second half of the class doing practical, hands-on cooking things. So we would learn, for instance, in our lecture of the day about, let's say, the nuns, the influence of the nuns on Mexican cooking in the viceregal period, in the colonial period. And then we would go into class and make candy, or make some sort of dessert that the nuns invented. So that was really cool. It felt like you were able to learn something, learn something historical and then tie it to the present day. So I thought that was really neat. And the historian was Edmundo Escamilla. He taught, they were the co-owners, he and his partner, Yuri de Gortari, was the jefe de cocina, so he taught all the cooking classes. All right, these are pretty much done. Yeah, so that was awesome. It was amazing to be able to be in that class with them. I loved it.
Yeah, I would catch him on the cable, like Canal Once, the Mexican station.
Yes,
And he
yes,
had this great class where everything he cooked was in cazuelas,
yes.
everything.
Yeah, they were really, they had really rigid, not in a bad way, I would say, but really strong ideas about what Mexican cooking should be and about upholding the traditions that have lasted for hundreds of years. And I remember, so the seeds in the morditas tend to like clump all together, but I got them all out. I'm gonna check on my water, which looked like didn't go off for some reason. I remember one time in class, he talked about one chef, a Mexican chef, he didn't give the name, one popular Mexican chef, and he had this booming voice, and I just kind of, anyway, he had very high standards. He talked about this chef who shall remain, nameless, he used soda, like orange soda in his carnitas, like, oh my gosh. And he was just like, can you imagine the horror? And so, okay.
During the pandemic time, I was able, after he passed away, they had video recordings of his philosophy on Mexican cuisine and history. Such an elegant gentleman,
Oh my
by the
God.
way, as well.
Yes. Well, they would lead every year, they would lead these talks with songs and dance, and it was all about the vice-regal, like the cuisine of the vice-regal period, and they would lead them at the castle, at Chapultepec Castle. So you could go to Chapultepec Castle, and which, in the 19th century was briefly occupied by the French Emperor Maximiliano and Carlota before they were executed. But you could go there and sort of be transported in time through these events that they held. And they were just the most super interesting people. And for me, they really helped me. They were the foundational people who helped introduce me to my own culture and my own cuisine that I didn't know anything about, honestly, because of, I think, I've come to reflect a lot on this, but I really feel like because of discrimination and, my grandparents arrived in LA in the 20s. It was a different time, and they were forcefully deported from LA in the 30s. So being Mexican was not something they wanted to embrace, Yeah. So they weren't people who were cooking all the moles and all the things, like they didn't do it. Okay, so we have our chiles. I have two, I'll show you. So I have two chile de árbol, two guajillos, and I have 4. I didn't show you the chile de árbol, but here they are. I've already toasted and put them in here. And I have 4 morita, and my water for some reason does not. I made a big deal about this electric kettle, and for some reason it doesn't want to go. Well, anyway, I'll just use hot water from the tap. Just do that. Okay, so I filled it with hot water. No one has ever told me to do this, but meaning I didn't learn this in cooking school, but it just makes me feel good. I like to weigh it down with something because the chile's floating. I'm like, you're not gonna soften fast enough. This is my American urgency. So I have these, I'm gonna put them back here. Have these soaking. And the next thing I'm gonna do is toast. There's really only a couple more things to make this marinade. I'm gonna toast the peanuts and the cinnamon. And then from there, one of those morditas is hot. It's making my eyes water. From there, we will make the marinade. So I'm gonna go back to the comal for the last time. And I just have a regular Ceylon cinnamon stick. So true cinnamon, in Mexico City, they sell them actually in these super tall, barras that pop out of these plastic jars, which is really cool. I'd never seen that before. But yeah, so true cinnamon, and these are just raw unsalted peanuts. You know, great snack. But they sell this stuff. You can just buy these anywhere. So you don't need to get special. Peanuts can burn really fast is one thing. So I don't want the heat to be too high. In my recipe, I was rereading my recipe. It says stir constantly. I don't think you actually need to do, but no, you don't want to let go. Do another obligation if you can help it. Staying here would be good. I'll stir it on.
Question, would that marinade work well with tofu?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think so. And you know what I was thinking, because now I have a son who's allergic to tree nuts, but he can eat peanuts, no problem. But I was thinking like, oh, I bet you could do this with pumpkin seeds too, instead of peanuts, if you have somebody who has a nut allergy. So, oh yeah, I moved back from the canal, sorry. But yeah, I think tofu would be great. So the recipe calls for letting it sit with the chicken overnight. So just to let it really soak in. But yeah, I think you can do it with, tofu for sure. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go back and stir my peanuts here.
Does it have to be with peanuts, or can we use other nuts besides pumpkin?
I'll stay over here, so I keep switching around. No, I think you can use another nut. I think the peanut, I didn't recipe test it with any other nuts, but I feel it's like work well as a thickener for the marinade. And like a nice fatty sort of binder. So I think if you don't have peanuts, you could use almonds, you know. I maybe would say sunflower seeds might add a little too much, like a little too much bitterness maybe. But yeah, I would say sure, why not? It's pretty forgiving. All right, so our nuts are starting to, I'll show you. You can see a little bit there. They're starting.
It's a nice color, nice coloring.
And the sesame stick, not sesame, the cinnamon stick is also starting to get some little spots on it. So these are about done. So I'm going to move these back over. We're done with the comal and the sartén. I'm going to put these in a bowl. Okay, so the next thing, oh, I lied, we're not done with the comal. I'm sorry. This is the next thing we got to do is we're going to go back over here. This is what's going to give it its color. So we're going to just toast some tomatoes. Just any kind of tomato is fine. I said I use Roma tomato in the recipe because that's what everybody always uses in Mexico City. But if it's tomato season and you want to use something else, that's totally fine. I would say it's maybe, I don't know, 10 ounces or so tomatoes. And then I have just a wedge of white onion that I'm going to put directly on the comal. And for this one, you do want the heat to be relatively hot because the tomatoes they're gonna take forever to soften, or they won't like fully soften if the heat's not hot enough. Grab this. So we'll leave these for a minute to get blackened. And I should tell you, so I'm going to move back over now. You can leave these on. So one thing that I didn't mention about this dish is that at the beginning, you brine the chicken. So I've been brining the chicken. I'm not going to show you like putting the salt on the chicken, but it's basically salting the chicken for salting the chicken. So maybe it's not a brine if there's no water in it, but it's just salting the chicken for like 4 hours. It can be a little bit longer, but it just makes the meat nice and moist. So I have the chicken in the fridge already salted. And when the marinade's done, I'll take it out and we'll coat the chicken with the marinade. And you can stick it in a bowl or any sort of container, cover it, any sort of airtight container, and you're going to want to let that sit overnight.
How much salt do you put on it? It's like salted just like for seasoning, or salt like there's a crust on it too, you know,
Salt,
either.
like there's a crust on it. I have in the recipe, which I think is a good rule of thumb, a 1/2 teaspoon per pound. So for this one was about 4 pounds, a little over 4 pounds. So I used 2 1/4 teaspoons. It doesn't come out tasting salty. So I guess if you're having to watch your salt intake, you could potentially skip that step, but the meat won't be as moist on the inside. I'm going to go back to the comal and turn over the tomatoes so you can see what they look like. So you can see the tomato has these nice blackened spots. You can hear the popping. I actually just love, this is one of my favorite things to do, is to cook on the comal. Just the visuals, the sounds, just brings me a lot of pleasure to do it. Oh, it's intensely hot. Yeah. So I'm using my hands, but it's actually really hot. So if you have tongs, even better. So we're just gonna sort of flip step. Oh, and they will wiggle, by the way. They'll bailan un poquito. Start to dance a little bit. So in the onion, same. It starts to, I'll sort of turn it so you can see that it gets nice and blackened on the inside. So we're just gonna let that sit a little longer. And then we'll remove everything to a little bowl. And then all of this is going to end up in our blender. So yeah, like I was saying, there's a few steps, but it's not, I wouldn't consider it to be complicated, the recipe. You do need to not be interrupted. You have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. All right, so here's the garlic. I'm going to show you this piece so you can see the blackened skin on the outside.
That's a hot comal. Those tomatoes are blistering super fast.
Yeah, it gets very hot in here. This comal I got in Mexico, and it is extremely hot. You can like heat up the whole room with this thing.
You know, I've seen videos like on Facebook, and there's other ladies that actually put foil on their comal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just like I guess it's for easy cleanup, I guess. I don't know, but it doesn't give I feel it doesn't give the true effect as when you do it directly on the comal.
I've never seen anybody put foil on a comal. Okay, I think I might leave these for a minute so they can take the garlic cloves off. My burner is actually it's like a pretty intense, burner. But if you can move your garlic cloves to the edge of the comal, like somewhere away from the hottest part, so that way they can try to soften up a little bit before they get too blackened, that would be ideal. It's hard to do on this burner for me, but at your house you can make this. You could do it that way. So I'm going to remove the garlic cloves, and I'll let the tomato and onion go for a minute. And let me check my chiles. See what's going on with those. Pretty good. I'll wait until we get the the tomato done. But yeah, so while we're waiting, do you have any other questions or anything else I can answer? Happy to talk about whatever you want to know.
Now, tell me more about your adventures at the cooking school. I mean, when you told me how long you were there, it's just like, if I could do that, that'd be amazing. It's like a fantasy to take a sabbatical and go to this teaching school. Yeah.
They ended up toward the end of my time there. They actually launched like an intensive, and I think it was 2 months. Maybe it was 8 weeks or something like that. Every day, 8 hours a day or whatever it was. But yeah, so at cooking school, we had to go out and buy our own metate. We had to go out and buy our own molcajete. We learned to season all of them in class. He told us what to do. We did everything by hand. And there were no shortcuts. No shortcuts. We made tamales by hand. So we got a cazuela, we got lard. We went to buy the actual harina de tamal at like the fresh ground tamal flour from the tortilla. Like they told us which places to go to. So I had never seen that before. I thought you make tamales with maseca, or you go to the carniceria at Christmas time and you ask for masa preparada, and that's what you do. But to actually have a tortilla a molino, give you this really moist flour, like coarse ground flour that had just been, corn not that long ago. It was really interesting. And it wasn't masa, it was like a flour seco,
Huh.
They did it seco. So that was really cool. So then we mixed it by hand, into the lard, mixing it around. And I'm like, ¿hasta cuándo? I never spoke up or said anything. I would just keep going until they would be like, okay, that is. What else did we do? We could do it with the batidora. We didn't have to do it with it by hand anymore, but Yuri really wanted us to do it by hand, at least a couple of times at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm sure you build up some muscles. It's a lot of, to do like in your the KitchenAid, it has to work a lot.
Oh,
I can't imagine doing it by hand.
Yes, it's like it's batiendo like 10 minutes, in the KitchenAid. So to do it by hand, it's a lot. It was a lot. And then your hand is melting the lard, right? Like your hand, the whole point is not to melt the lard because you want to aerate it. You want to add in, as much air as you can. And by hand, your hand is melting the lard automatically.
Interesting.
So that was interesting. We made chocolate from scratch. It's another thing we did on the metate. So we went to the market, we bought our cacao, and then we ground it, from scratch in metate, and with a little sterno
Underneath.
Yeah.
To heat up the metate, yeah, so the chocolate would
So
melt.
the cocoa butter would separate. That was fascinating. What else did we do? We we did all sorts of things. We would, in class, he would go over the recipe. It was a little bit different. He would go over the recipe and we would have to write everything down. It wasn't like at the beginning, he had the dish already prepared. He would go over, okay, everybody, today's recipe is mole de bodas from Guerrero, or whatever the case may be. Okay, so we have 10 mulatos, 8 chile de ancho, 7 guajillos, whatever the case may be. He would go through the whole recipe. We would be writing down any notes that he would be saying. So you had to listen, because he didn't go over it again. You had to listen, write it all down. He would go over the method. And if you miss a step, then that's your fault. You had to listen, write it all down, and then do the recipe. So if you had no context for the recipe, I'm like, I don't know what color a mole de bodas is supposed to be, And this was in a time where you couldn't just pull out your phone and Google mole de bodas and see the videos that came up or whatever, you know. There really wasn't that much in either language about like regional Mexican cooking on the internet. So I often felt sort of like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm just gonna do what he said and hope that it comes out. And I relied a lot on my classmates who would tell me, who did know, you know, some of them did know, like, oh yeah, it's supposed to be this color, or, oh, you know, you stir it until this point. But I remember when we were making mole and I was really troubled because I didn't know how much salt to put in. I didn't know how much salt to put in the mole. And it was al gusto. And I'm like, but how much? I'm like, just, I don't know. And they're like, hasta que sepa, you know? And I'm like, but I don't know, hasta que sepa. Like, you know, I just felt so unsure because I only had a mole maybe, I don't know, maybe a half a dozen times in my life, maybe a dozen at the most, like before I got there, you know, and they weren't, I didn't even know if I liked mole before I moved to Mexico City. And it turned out I hadn't had the best mole. So I'm gonna go back over to the comal because I can smell the onion and the tomatoes. Ooh, look at that. So I'm feeling them get a lot softer. So I think I could put them in the blender now.
Yeah, because we got about 13 minutes.
Okay. So here's what we're gonna do. Put these in here. We'll add everything else. We'll get our chicken out. Toss in the peanuts, garlic. So I'm tossing in the peanuts. I'm going to crumble the canela, the cinnamon. We have 2 cloves of garlic that from before. Toss in. They weren't peeled, so I'm just taking the paper off right now. And we have our chiles that I'm going to toss in. And the onion. So you don't want the water for the chiles. Sometimes you do, but not in this case. In cooking school, actually, I would discard the water and then get in trouble because you weren't supposed to discard the water. Did he say discard the water? No, he did not. You shouldn't have discarded the water. It's like, sorry. Sometimes you want the water to make the blender blades go a little bit faster. Or if it's too thick, you can thin it out. Okay, so we have our chiles. I'm gonna toss in the onion. Chop that up real fast. The onion. I'm sure a Vitamix would make quick work of all of this, but I have not used a Vitamix most of my life. So just chop it up. All right, and then I have a 1/4 cup of vinegar, just white household white vinegar. And then I'm gonna add in 1 tablespoon of vanilla. Okay. And so we will get that going. All right, it's gonna be loud. I apologize for the noise. All right, the other thing I wanted to say about blending is when I was in school, I remember being struck by the fact that we were blending for a long time. I would be like, isn't it, this is my common refrain, aren't we done? Are we done by now? hurry, you know, as the American, are we done? Is this? And they'd be like, no, it has to keep blending. You want it to be smooth. So, ooh, that smells delicious. And you can smell like the floral perfume of the vanilla. It's really good. So I didn't add any salt. Again, it's salt to taste. Ooh, delicious. Sal al gusto. And the short amount of time that we have left, I'm gonna just rub this all over the chicken so you can see how it ends up. All right. So let me get my chicken out. And the salted chicken, just had it sitting in the fridge, and remove this. Just gonna take the contents of the blender. It's a little wet, but I'm just gonna pour it right over, stir some of the salt in. Just gonna pour it over. Put it in the bowl. Pour it over that. And you just want to make sure you get the marinade under the skin of the chicken. This is the fun part, I guess. Okay, so turn it over, try to work it into underneath the skin and the crevices. That's pretty much it. So you let this sit overnight, and then I have some like kind of new potatoes that I put in the roasting pan. So I like these because you don't even have to cut them. You can just put them directly in like that. I also have some raw, just some garlic cloves that I peeled that go in with the potatoes. And then I really like that there's also beets. I cut these up into quarters. So just raw beets. And you can use any color beets you want. And then red onion. So red onion cut up. So those are the veggies that sit in the roasting pan. That's pretty much it. And then you cook it for about an hour, and I'll show you the final product. Let me get the marinade off my hands. Hold on. So I was telling Jimena that I put this a little too close to the top. It should be a little dark. This looks burned to a crisp. It's not burned to a crisp. If you look in the recipe, it's dark. Like when you cook it, the chile, which is red, will turn like a darker color. This got a little burned on top. So in the recipe, it says to put it in the middle of your oven. Like I would have had to take out the top shelf. Anyway, so it got a little burned, but you can see the potatoes, yummy potatoes and all the things. There's also lemon and thyme in the cavity. So
wait, no, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere, because what we should do for Instagram and YouTube, can you hold up the pan close and say cheese? Because usually what Alvarado does, he'll take a picture.
Oh, sure.
Let's see when he hops on. All right.
Okay, here I come. Okay. Uno, dos.
Turn it around here.
Oh, it's beautiful.
A little less.
Oh, there you go. All right. Uno, dos, y tres. All right. Thank you.
All right. It happened. Yeah, that's basically it. I don't know what else I can tell you about the chicken, but
well, it looks delicious. I'm definitely going to try the marinade. I'm slowly transitioning into being more vegan, more vegetable friendly. So, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that marinade, and I'm going to buy some tofu, and I'll tag you.
Please do.
Yes. So again, thank you so much for sharing at delicious adobo for chicken, and hopefully I'm sure we're fine with tofu, and for sharing your knowledge with us. I'm so envious that you're able to go to school there in Mexico City. I mean, it's like that would have been like on a bucket list to go and work with the chef, and you know, such a loss to the culinary community.
Yeah, he was, there was nobody like him. I haven't met anybody like him before or since. Either of them, but especially Yuri.
Yes, definitely such a loss. But again, such a contribution to keeping the history, the techniques that passed down to you, and you're sharing today with us here for En Cocina. Again, Lesley, mil gracias. Thank you so much for sharing. I look forward to working with you very soon. When you come to Los Angeles, please let us know. We'd love to see you at La Plaza and to check out La Cocina once we're officially open. But definitely, muchísimas gracias. Y con eso, I pass it to mi compañero Abelardo.
Well, thank you so much, Jimena. Thank you so much, Lesley. That was delicious. And I'm not going to ask who's going to be enjoying your pollo rostizado, because I could figure out it's going to be your husband and your 2 kids. All
Yes,
right.
for sure.
And do you eat it with tortillas? How do you?
Yes, I had some. I was realizing, oh no, I actually buy like corn tortillas in 5-pound from my tortilleria, and then I freeze them. So I hadn't taken some out. We just went through our last package. So I have some in my little Ziploc bag that are defrosting right now. But yeah, I would say corn tortillas or flour, you know, whatever you have. But I would do, I would just serve like probably, I like to have beans. I would just do the regular old beans and rice, and or if you don't feel like it, just I feel like the chicken and the tortillas and the potatoes and the beets are.
Yeah, that's a pretty complete meal right there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you out there who joined us today. Sorry we couldn't post it to Facebook right away, but we will get there once Facebook gets its act together, which I hope will be soon. If you would like to see this En Cocina again, we will be posting it on our YouTube page, on our Facebook page, and also our website at lapca.org, where we have all of Jimenez hosted Cocina programs, about 45 of them, and you'll get to learn so much about Mexican food. You're going to be off next week. We all are, because it's Indigenous Peoples Day. So we have next week off, so no En Cocina. However, the following week, which is on the 18th, we have Tostadas de Tinga de Carne Molida with Lilo Vargas, also known as of the website TikTok page Huevona Life.
She's hilarious. She's hilarious.
Yeah, you got to check her out. So that'll be on Monday, the 18th. Meanwhile, the rest of this week, we have on October 6th, Wednesday at 7 o'clock, Mexico Resistance with Antonio Turac, a documentary photographer from Mexico, who'll be opening up an exhibition very close by at Eastside Projects here in Chinatown. And then on October 8th, Friday, Dan Guerrero Happy Hour with guest Abel Valenzuela, the educator, author, and lecturer. And then the next couple weekends, first of all, Leala Outdoor Festival of Spanish Language Literature. And then on October 17th, Latina Fest, Outdoor Entertainment and Vendor Festival. So we got a lot going on here at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, including all of our virtual programming, including En Casa con La Plaza Cocina. So thank you so much. Thanks to our sponsor, Union Pacific Foundation. And good afternoon to everybody. Nos vemos pronto. Bye-bye.